can Keir Starmer make a difference at today's Ukraine talks with Trump? 0207 862 2222 to get your calls in right now. It's all over the pages today. The Mail says it's a D-Day at the White House. The Times says Zelennskyy wants security guarantees. The White House is hosting not just Zelennskyy, but a group of other European leaders. Here's another one here. Euro takes a stand. Now, last week, Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin in Alaska, and they couldn't actually come to an agreement. There they are. They shook hands. But after 3 hours of talks, there wasn't really an agreement that was settled. But one thing that did come out was that they weren't no longer interested in a ceasefire. They wanted a peace deal to come straight in. Kevin, big meeting today. 7 European leaders are going. Yesterday, the list kept growing and growing and growing and growing. Do you think they're going to be able to get to a point where they have some sort of agreement?
Possibly, but of course Putin wants it on his own terms, which is a surrender, and Trump is putty in his hands. For whatever reason, Trump abuses allies, democracies, and he sucks up to the white nationalist authoritarian in the Kremlin. And Starmer and the others are going to try and bolster Zelennskyy, because we know that. Can you imagine if Putin had invaded the States and had grabbed California and Alaska, and then we were saying to the Americans, oh, you just got to give up that territory, you got to give him what he wants. That's basically what Trump is saying now to Zelennskyy. You've got to give up bits of Ukraine. Now, it might be very difficult for Ukraine to recover those bits that have been occupied by Putin with his unprovoked invasion. But it's outrageous to say you've got to give up this part of your territory. We wouldn't accept it if we'd been invaded and Devon and Cornwall and Dorset and Somerset. Yeah, you would say, no, that is our territory. So Starmer and the others are going along to try and bolster Zelennskyy. But Trump is a loose cannon who seems to hate democracies. So can they make a difference?
I mean, look,
they might, but we could have another case where Zelennskyy just gets a dressing down from Trump and his sidekick, J.D. Vance.
I disagree with you on some of that. Look, I've always supported Ukraine when I was in Parliament. I do think it's got to the stage now, I'm not sure we can fund it indefinitely. You know, the British people are struggling.
But what are you saying? But let me should Keir Starmer today tell Donald Trump that, and tell Zelennskyy that, look, whatever deal's on the table, you've got to take it, because we just can't keep paying for this war?
No, I think there's several elements to this. I've always supported Ukraine, as I said. I mean, I even took a group of Ukrainians down to meet David Cameron when he was Foreign Secretary. And my ex-husband's in Ukraine as well. But I think there's several cards that we need to use. I agree with you completely, Kevin, that, you know, if it was our country, we'd fight to the death. You know, the way Putin's behaved, and the tens of thousands of Ukrainian children which are now in the hands of Russia, you know, it's a tragedy, and every government across the world needs to be calling them out. Now, the things that I think that we need to be pushing Putin on is I think we need to be prepared to talk about sanctions if they don't, stronger sanctions if it doesn't come to an agreement. But also, I really take umbrage to the fact that the UN Security Council, they are a key member still, Russia are, when tens of thousands of children have gone missing from Ukraine. There's so many things we could use.
Okay.
But also, I disagree with you on this, Kevin. We cannot discount Trump, because he got Putin to the table.
Okay.
Other leaders haven't. So we cannot discount him.
Let us just remind ourselves, just for people who might not be up to speed with the latest, let's just remind ourselves of what's currently going on. So Russia is currently occupying about 20% of Ukraine. That, of course, includes Crimea down here. Now, Putin's been focusing on these four regions, the oblasts, as they're called. That's Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson. Those are the ones that Russian troops have gone into. Now, what he's particularly interested in is this area here, the Donbass region. That is the bit that, as far as we know, and again, we don't know the exact details of what was discussed in Alaska in those 3 hours before, behind closed doors, but this is the bit that he really wants. You can see it here. And he is prepared to take that as part of a peace deal, in order to bring the war to an end, the Donbass region there. Now, about 30% of other areas remain in Ukrainian hands, but that's all fiercely contested. So that is what is on the table, if you like, Kevin.
Well, that's what Putin's put on the table. Now, the Donbass is the industrial area of Ukraine. So think of the northeast Teesside or South Wales. It's a similar. They're coal fields, there's steel production.
Important also to say that traditionally it's had a very, very heavy Russian-affiliated population, which was one of the cover stories, if we want to put it that way, that Putin used of going in to protect Russian speakers.
Yeah, because if you look across what was the former Soviet Union, Ukraine was part of that. People moved around. They were moved around. Borders were sometimes drawn in an arbitrary way. For instance, the Crimea was a part of Russia until the mid-1950s, when it was moved over to Ukraine for administrative reasons. It's largely Russian speaking. Now, I can see why you can make a claim that Ukraine should be with Russia, but that's very different to invading and seizing, which breaks international law. And what Trump is in danger of doing, and I think to some extent he's already done it, because he is treating Putin as an equal, not a pariah, and giving him legitimacy, is Putin wins.
Okay.
That's...
Well, let's see what people are saying at home. Dorothy's got in touch from Peterborough. Dorothy, welcome to the show. Good morning. Do you think Keir Starmer is going to make a difference?
Well, the thing is, I'm not sure he will, to be quite honest. I just want to put the point over that in all the television programmes, nobody mentions the children that have been taken by Russia, which the nice lady on your panel has just said,
Andrea,
actually.
yeah.
And that nobody mentions that. All these children going out of leaving their families. And also, would President Trump want part of his land taken away? Would he not fight for that as well? He wants to give the land to Putin. Would that...
Yeah, it's what Kevin was saying earlier. It does feel that the aggressor, Dorothy, is being rewarded, even if it's a small part of the Donbass region, but it still feels that the aggressor is being rewarded. Dorothy, thank you. It was interesting, the letter was published, but we were told that Donald Trump handed a letter from his wife, Melania Trump, addressing Vladimir Putin directly, talking about the, I think, estimated of 20,000 children that have been taken from Ukraine to Russia. Now, what good that letter has done, we don't know. But it was addressed via that letter from Melania Trump to President Putin. Now, look, after the break, we'll be taking more of your calls on whether you think we're going to get into your calls now on whether Starmer can make a difference at the Ukraine talks with Trump today. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need to give us a call. Will he be able to push Donald Trump to tell Putin that keeping the land he seized is off the table? Would Trump listen to Keir Starmer if he asks him to promise the US will guarantee Ukraine's security? Let's find out what you are saying at home. Ursula is in London. Welcome to the show. Good morning. Do you think Keir Starmer is able to make a difference?
I sincerely hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Because this reminds me of a situation in Europe after 80 years ago where Churchill and the and Stalin got together and with their green pen marked out the borders, which gave a whole chunk of Eastern Europe to be controlled by Russia.
I think you're referring to Yalta, the conference.
Absolutely.
The conference
Absolutely.
there. It does feel, Ursula, I think you're making a good point that even though we're seeing this big show of support, 7 European leaders are going, General Secretary of NATO, German Chancellor, Italian Prime Minister, they're all going to support President Zelenskyy. But in a sense, they're going to guarantee or support a deal that they haven't done. The deal, if there is a deal on the table, has been done by President Trump and President Putin.
That should not have been allowed in the first place. We should have stepped in at the very beginning when you had kilometres and kilometres of Russian tanks on the Ukrainian border. Now, I feel very
remember at the time when we were
about this point.
All covering it, and everybody, even people in the government at the time, were saying, no, there's nothing to worry about. Vladimir Putin's not going to be silly enough to invade Ukraine. And the next thing you know, tanks are rolling over the borders. Ursula, thank you for kicking us off. Jack's in Cheshire. Jack, welcome to the show. Good morning. Do you think Keir Starmer has got enough leverage? He's been thought of as a bit of the Trump whisperer, along with Giorgia Meloni. Do you think he'll have enough influence to get the right result?
Being very honest with him, being very straight about this, the answer is basically no, because Keir Starmer just bends to whatever Trump says. He's becoming like his little puppet, just like Blair was with George W. Bush. And the thing is, I just have this horrible suspicion that there's a deal going, a behind-the-doors deal going with Trump and Putin. That Putin invades places, Trump does a deal behind the political leaders' backs in the country concerned. So Trump looks like he's the saviour, and they both cash in on the deal, where they both get something out of it. And Trump looks like some sort of like great saviour, the knight on the white charger, and all that nonsense.
Jack, I think you're totally wrong with the Tony Blair and Keir Starmer comparison, because Tony Blair, you're quite right, just went along with what Bush wanted and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. I think both were disasters. Britain shouldn't have got involved. But this isn't the case here. Starmer is trying to use his unlikely bromance and friendship with Trump to bring Trump back on side to the European position, not take Europe and Ukraine to the US position. So I think you're wrong on that. I think he's got probably very little influence, but I think the Prime Minister in this case is doing the right thing. And it's very different to what happened with Blair. OK,
Jack, thank you. Let's move on to Kathy, who's in Cheshire. Kathy, good morning. Do you think Keir Starmer has that ability to influence Donald Trump today, or is he just going there to be told what to do by Donald Trump?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is going to make it clear that it's not going to be a repeat of the Normandy landings with thousands of US troops dying on the coast of the Black Sea in someone else's war. I think he's made it very clear it's not America's problem, this. And also, I'll just say that when countries invade other countries, things are always more complex than the propaganda we're fed. This idea that someone just walks into someone's country for no reason whatsoever. It's always a lot more complex than that. We're not given the full picture either, well, in any wars that we've been involved with.
Kathy, are you pro-Putin, sympathetic to Putin?
I'm sympathetic for British people, British taxpayers and British soldiers. I don't want them all dying because of somebody else's war. And
Andrea, you sympathise with this point of view?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said earlier, I've always supported Ukraine, but when I see the British people struggling now, I do question this never-ending black hole. We can't keep financially putting this money in much longer.
But then what's the solution? I hear Kathy's point of view. I hear your point of view. I know a lot of people at home will be thinking...
Well, I said...
But what is the solution? Well, do you tell Vladimir Zelenskyy, OK, Putin's come in, he wants 20% of your land, just give it to him because we can't afford to help you out?
No, I mean, they've got to keep keep fighting it, definitely. But
how? They need money.
No, but as I said earlier, we should be using international sanctions on Putin. We should be removing him from the UN Security Council because, as I said earlier, tens of thousands of children are now in Russian hands, Ukrainian children. That's a travesty. We should be using the international community to put pressure on.
But sanctions so far, this war has been going on for 3.5 years.
I know.
Sanctions have done very little to even slow down Russia.
But we need to up them. Yeah.
But look, you have a party leader who's been very, he said Putin was Nigel Farage said Putin was the leader he most admired at one point. But isn't defence spending, paying $2.5 billion, whatever it is, arming Ukraine, not sending British soldiers, but arming, isn't that how you defend your country better? Because if Putin doesn't take over the whole of Ukraine, he gets a bloody nose. There's 1 million Russian soldiers being killed, maimed, or injured. It's a forward defence by Britain.
Let me just pause you there. I'll come back to you, Andrea, in just a second. I just want to hear from Mark, who's been waiting patiently to speak to us from the West Midlands. Mark, good morning. Do you think Keir Starmer can make that little bit of difference in that meeting today?
Good morning. No, I don't think so. I think he's nothing more than a puppet. And a deal has probably been brokered behind the scenes already, and this is a meeting going through the motions. And frankly, all I hear is double standards. If you're willing to take away Palestinian land to create a racist apartheid state, then why shouldn't Ukraine take land? I remember the United Kingdom giving away land it didn't own to create a new state. And
Sorry, I'm getting confused, Mark. What land has Ukraine taken?
No. United Kingdom gave away Palestinian land to create a...
Right, well, we're talking about a different subject, though, Mark, but thank you for your call. Look, later we're going to be asking whether to bring in a wealth tax for the super rich. Is that the answer to the Chancellor's problems? After the break...